Welcome back, wannabes and creators, to another episode of The Complete Creative, the podcast that helps you build and sustain a better creative business. And today on the show, we have Shanon Cason, who is an amazing podcaster out of Detroit. And he is the host of 3 podcasts: Homemade Stories, In Good Company, and The Trouble. I met Shanon at Podcast Evolutions, which seems like a running commentary through a lot of these previous episodes. I really learned a lot at Podcast Evolutions, and it's becoming more and more valuable every day, which is pretty uncommon for a show. Most shows lose value over time, but this one seems to be gaining value over time, at least when it comes to my podcast, my confidence, my setup, my audience, and really moving this podcast forward in a positive direction. So I wanted to have Shanon on because I met him at a networking event one night after the show, and everybody who came up to him was just gushing about his show, Homemade Stories. And I haven't seen a reaction like that for many people in my life. And I really wanted to have him on to talk about how he makes that connection with audiences, how he thinks about vulnerability and podcasts and having multiple shows and a whole lot more. So I hope you enjoy this one. If you are enjoying this show, then please head on over to thecompletecreative.com and check out all of our epic blog posts, free courses, and a whole lot more. For instance, you could take a free course on how to build a successful creative business. It is 10 days, 10 emails with the best tips, tricks, and hacks that I've learned for building a successful business. It's very simple. It's just a little morsel every morning, distilling 10 years of my creative career and what I've learned to help you build a better creative business today. And you can get that at thecompletecreative.com/FBC. That's thecompletecreative.com/FBC. That's it for me. Let's get on with the show. Take it away, Shanon. Tell us what you're passionate about these days.
My mind has been on um, just people's stories, like finding out about what they're actually going through during this time, recording it and documenting it in some way. And also, like myself, to be able to document what I'm feeling in this time and get it recorded in some way, recorded and writing it and writing thoughts and art and feelings and then also doing audio work with it. So that's what I've been working on as well. So it's been uh it's been fun. I mean, it's a solitary thing to do, so it's uh it's a passion of mine. So I've been in my office a lot.
Well, it's kind of solitary, but also it involves a lot of people with some of your shows. I know I've been listening to In Good Company, where you're interviewing different people in Detroit, and that is, while you're doing most of it, it feels like alone. You also have to go out and get interviews from these other people.
Yeah, but the one thing though, going through what world we live in right now, it's a it's a quick break the ice thing. I think it's I don't know if I can say a bad word, but it's a no bullshit time in the world where I can talk to people and we get straight to it, and it's a more of a honesty to conversations right now because um I think of what everybody's experiencing, which is what I like to get to anyway, with interviews and with myself as well within the stories that I write for my own work.
I definitely want to talk about storytelling, but before we get to there, so the one thing I've listened to a bunch of your shows now, and you have such this interesting sort of cadence and rhythm that it's quite a bit slower than most other shows. And I was wondering how you developed that, or was it intentional, or did it just happen and people responded to it?
Well, I think it's always been true to me, and and one of the things in any kind of thing you you start working on, say you're a comedian or you're a writer or something. You start working on stuff and you copy other people in a little while because people you're impressed by or people you might like, and then eventually you come back around to yourself, to who you are, and that's what I think, far as my style and slow delivery and just um, almost normalcy of life stories. I think that that's always been there. I remember even in grade school, they would call me slow motion. And it was a lot of different things involved in that, how slow I spoke or how like laid back I was. And then also I played sports. They would always have me lead, like if we was doing like a cross country run or something like that, because I was just gonna stay the pace. I wasn't going I wasn't really gonna try to, be outrunning anybody. It wasn't a competition to me. I just like, let's just do the pace and we'll see where, we'll just do the work and we get back and everybody's not as tired as if somebody who wants to show off is leading the crew. So that's just been a thing I've always done from grade school. I think about it, and I found I came back to that as I wrote and created more and more. I came back to that.
One thing that I think really speaks to the episodes that you do, because there's this like slow build up to, I don't want to say nothing because it's not nothing, but like when I first started listening to the homemade stories, I thought they were I was expecting these like big big like life revelatory moments, and what I think you do so well is you take these like slow small moments and you expand on them until you're like leaning in to like the smallest nuance moment, and you've kind of figured out a way to use that of a long elongated breath that you have to tell these stories that uh that like just every sentence you're leaning in, but the actual meat of the story is very simple, and it's like a kind of everyday moment that you've built up into this beautiful thing. And I really appreciated that about listening to the show, because I'm not one who does well with the little moments, with like making little moments grand and amazing, and you do that so well.
Oh, that's an honor to hear that. Yeah, thank you. It's it is what I'm attracted to as well. Like I like big moments and big things that happen, but even in the big things that happen are the small things. So still gotta take your daughter to school, or still gotta do, so the dynamics of, and that's why I want to, like, I'm passionate about documenting right now, because we're in a worldwide pandemic, but then it's the pedestrian life that's happening all the while, and how what my fear is, and what I'm feeling. And it's not really like fear of people or fear of death, or it's just fear of, dang, I didn't know I would be confronted with my mortality right now. Did I do everything I need to? Did I create the stuff I wanted to create? Did I do the things I wanted to do? Not to say it's that deep, but at the same time, it is. We've all been touched by this as we're living in it. So, but I do, like, I wouldn't, if I was to tell that story, I wouldn't tackle that story from the COVID-19 uh uh, task group who has to, and they're looking for. I wouldn't tackle that from that worldwide huge view. I would tackle that story from a daughter and a husband and wife in a small home that they're renting in Lincoln Park, Michigan. I would tell it from that point of view rather than the bigger point of view. So I think, people have different doors that they come into a story from, and I always like uh, the more everyday life point of view. So if it was to tell that story and everything was happening, we'll be seeing it from the eyes of that small family in a rented home in America, USA.
You say it with such precision. Is that how you're tackling it? Like as you're going about telling these stories about this time?
Yeah, that's how I'm gonna look at it. Like, and even with the work that I do with other podcast work that I do, I kind of stay within my realm because it's my realm. So, but I love, I like watching big stories as well. But I just know that that's not really what I'm drawn to, as far as in creating. But I can watch them, like I can watch Westworld. I can, and I like those stories, and they package them well too to put them into basic life too. But I really like the just normalcy of life stories.
One thing that you also do is you're very focused, not just on these small moments, but on one city. You do so much work in Detroit specifically. Was that something that came about just because you grew up in that area, or what attracts you to Detroit specifically?
Well, Detroit, I was born and raised in Detroit. We grew up on the northwest side, and then I moved to a small town called Ecorse, which is a city that, like a suburb of Detroit, that Detroiters will look down on. Ecorse was that city, like, you from Ecorse, So I grew up in Ecorse, and then I moved to Southwest Detroit, and but I think what happens is you're in an area and you can really hone in and get the tone from the area that you're in. I play around if I write fiction, and I'll read some things from other areas. Like I wrote a story on the characters were in Pittsburgh. So I just was like reading a lot about Pittsburgh, or I wrote a story about somebody in LA who lived in a neighborhood in LA. So I just read a lot about that city. I hadn't been there, but it's a lot of it is just based on what I can see and what I can feel. And if I don't know what it is, I find I get a lot of information from comedians as well. So comedians, they'll talk about things that um the thing about comedy is like the familiar, something super familiar, but everybody might not know it. So if you watch a black comedian, you go walk more into the black world than if you just read a book on it or something like that, or just read some articles or some Wikipedia pages. The comedian is going to go into like small details that you might not know. So I'll listen to an Indian comedian to jump into an Indian family, or a Irish comedian to kind of get the feel. What is Boston like? Listening to Boston comedians, or so I listen to like certain things because they're gonna, like, if you listen to Detroit comedians that talk about Detroit in a way that you're not familiar with, but you be like, that must be something in Detroit, and you can kind of go down that rabbit trail. So it's one of them things of just knowing this area. That's probably why I talk about it mostly, but I like to play around with other areas as well.
Well, the general like marketing theory or podcasting theory is be broad and be like don't be specific to any one place. But again, I'm going from my own information of like what I've listened to. Like it was fascinating. It's fascinating to hear about something so specific as Detroit. And I just listened to the new episode or the last episode of In Good Company where you did God, the department store, Higglesworth,
Mm-hmm.
Higglebaum, Higgleman, what the one I can't.
Hemmerholz,
Yes, that one, and
Hemmerholz
I was like,
department store.
oh my God, I remember something like that in my town. That was just like the local thing.
Uh-huh. That's cool. Then that's the biggest um honor too. Like when somebody relate to something that they have no association with directly. And I love that. You know, I when I tell a story about being a black kid growing up in Detroit, and then some white lady in Seattle writes me and says, "This reminds me of my childhood." You know, that's a huge compliment to me. So I love that, and that's what I look to. You know, it's not what I guess I am pushing for that, but also I do want it to relate.
Yeah, the way I think you just make it feel so real, and I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you make it so like you were talking about down to the specifics of what they of like what they carried in their line when they first started to like today, and there was just this there was such specificity. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you sort of develop that story and how you take the main interview and break it down and just develop that like flow that you have.
Yeah, so within good company, I'm talking to it's a podcast about Detroit entrepreneurs. It's looking to inspire other entrepreneurship in Detroit and also to lead people to resources that's on the website ingoodcodedetroit.com. So the aspect of the podcast is like the beautiful store that you can go into and you can get involved into listen to a person's story, and then it brings you into this world of in good company. So I've covered iron working company, a hat maker, somebody who's doing Detroit T-shirts. You know, a company that does this. The last episode that you're talking about is Hemmelholz department store, which was a department store that dissolved in the 70s. So they went out of business in the 70s, but in the 70s in Detroit and before that, 60s, 50s, it started in 1907. So Detroit was booming. You had an amazing auto industry. You drive around Detroit. You look at the architecture of Detroit. It's beautiful. I mean, it's top of the line everything within a lot of these old buildings that you go into. You drive through certain neighborhoods in Detroit, and it's mini mansion after mini mansion, old architecture, built houses, beautiful. But some of them are next door to a place that's abandoned, or right now we're going through a resurgence, so a lot of things are being rehabbed. So talking to her was interesting because I know she came from that time frame of the bustling Detroit, but then her family saw after the 67 riots and after those things happened, societal change happened in Detroit, and then they went out of business. And they went out of business with a lot of retailers. Some of them last longer, but they all went out of business. B. Siegel, Hudson's, Winkleman's, all these places went out of business over time, you know, because the auto industry changed. So it was just interesting to listen to her story because what I come in from it is I'm thinking about my mom, I'm thinking about my dad, I'm thinking about this bustling Detroit that I never knew. So I'm trying to get information from her. I'm reading a lot. I'm studying her family a lot, and then I can dive into questions and stories and lead the narration in a way that hopefully brings the audience into that world as well. Because even if they didn't live in it, and I wanted it to hit for the people who lived in it, because I know it's a nostalgia there. Like if you knew a Himmel Holes or if you knew whatever department stores in the area that you live in, you remember that. You have fond memories of it. You remember that time frame. But then I wanted to also for the people who don't know, like myself, and then generations before, I mean, after me, also, you know, just kind of get a fill in from what, because they remember it through the stories of our parents and grandparents. So just kind of give them a easy way to tap into that time as well.
Do you have a story framework that you generally start with? Like that you use for most of what you do on your podcast, or does it sort of evolve organically over time?
So I think of two things like when I'm starting. I think of what mood I want my audience to feel. And I do that a lot with music. Like I came up in music, not playing music or singing or anything like that, but just listening. Like my uncle, he had records wall to wall, and he would play certain music, and it would just put me in a certain mood. It would just take me on a certain journey emotionally. So I think from that standpoint first, I'll say, what do I want my audience to feel? And I think about like music. I think about like I'm listening to this song right now called Waters of March, I think it's called Waters of March. I forgot the guy name, Joe Kib or something like that. And it's a beautiful song. It's like an amazing song, Brazilian song, like, but it's got a feel to it. Like you listen to it and it's a feel good song, but then there's some danger in it. Like it's a feel good, but you don't want to go too far because you can get, so it's like I like that feeling. So I'll think about that feeling and I'll think, okay, I want my audience to feel that. I might even say to myself, I wanted my audience to like say that Himmelho story. I want my audience to want to call their grandma after listening to this. You know, I might think about that feeling. Say, okay, I want the audience person to want to call their grandma and ask them about the department store that they took them to when they was 5 or whatever and got their first Easter suit. So I think about that, but then I'll outline it as well. So I'll outline, okay, I want to start here. I want to go here. I want to go here and then go here. And then I'll start to write the story or work on the interview and if it's an interview, I might even think about that before I even talk to the person. So I'm thinking about, okay, I know I'm gonna tell this story about this hat maker in Detroit. He used to have pimps come in his place. He used to have gangsters come in his place. So I'm like, I want to get some of those stories in there, some dark. So I'm thinking about that before I even go have an interview. I'm thinking about like I want this story to feel like a gangster film. I want somebody to listen to this story and think about a 38 special in a drawer or something like. So I'm thinking about it in that sense from an emotional standpoint, but also I'm outlining it. Then I'll go have an interview, and then I'll outline further and create the story that I want to create.
I love it. Do you like you have with me, I tell these big, enormous, like world-ending stories, so it's kind of easy for me to decide what like story to tell because it's like, is it world-ending? Well, it's a maybe. If it's not world-ending, it's probably not gonna be a story that I should tell. How do
Mm-hmm.
you think about uh the stories that you actually tell? Like, how do you find the stories that you think are worth telling?
So okay, I'm curious on your standpoint. You saying you look at them as you will look at them like, okay, huge drama, huge world, and do you out because I would imagine these stories that you build in worlds and you build it, you outline that, correct, or is it
I
just you
do.
just jump right in? Okay.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I didn't used to, but now I do, especially so I have a I have a couple relatively long series. One's 5 books and one I'm getting into my fourth book. And I was able to not outline when I had a single book, but once we got to maybe 16 books in a series or just a never ending series, I feel like if I don't outline, I'm just asking to break the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I was in the same boat. Like initially, I would write without an outline. I would just write whatever comes to mind and kind of just like go wherever. But I found that because I was thinking like the outline would constrain me, but I found that I don't even need to follow the outline. The outline just kind of helps me start writing, or to help me like it'll give me something like to. It's just like losing weight or working out. If I'm just working out just to work out. I need a goal. I need a goal that I'm striving for, something I want to go to, or I want to fit in these pants. I want to wear this suit that I didn't wear 20 years ago. So it's like I need a goal, and the outline kind of helps me towards, like I'll say, oh, I want to end this one with the guy, you know, shooting somebody. But I want to get there, so I got that goal, and I might skip a lot of my outline to get there, but I know where I'm going. So I just know where I'm going, and it helps me. And other people, you can write all kind of different ways. I understand the writer who doesn't outline. I understand that totally because I used to do that. But then Now I just need that goal, especially with different projects. You just need to see where everything is at in the process, you know.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I think I love what you said about the abandoning a lot of the outline, but like having the goal. What I do is I kind of have in my outlines. I kind of I list like every 1,000 words basically on the and have a bullet point of every 1,000 words, and then every roughly 10,000 words, I have a bold piece that I'm like I have to get here. Like I have to hit this moment because this moment is like crucially important for the emotional impact of the piece.
Mm,
But if I have to not, if I find some better way to move around this like part up here between like 0 and 10,000 words, that's okay as long as it's driving to this moment because
mm.
that's where the crescendo is going to happen for the audience.
That's so true. Yeah, I agree with you. I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying.
But I guess
Yeah.
I understand because when I do stuff for my creative company, the Complete Creative, I have a blog over there, and sometimes I do these narrative podcasts, but not usually. But when I'm doing a blog post, how I'm thinking about it is I take a moment from my life that like has happened, and then I use that to illustrate a universal truth in the
Mm,
world, and then I come back to flip it on its head at the end to like tell people how they can use it, that truth, in their own business. And that's sort of the framework. If you look at all of my work, it kind of like starts with some incident, and then you flip it on its head, and you like talk about the universality of it, and then it ends with how it can be actionable to the people reading.
mm. Yeah, so you got a process on it. You got a system that you put it into. But do you think the listener or the reader notices the system?
I don't know. I've been doing it for so long that it just has is like the natural style. I think everybody has a natural style when they write or produce something, and it's about getting in the rhythm of what they do. And then when you're in that rhythm, we talked about your show, the homemade stories, especially, is like a very different rhythm than anything that else I listen to. But I like sort of get into your flow, and
Yeah.
I'll bet if I looked at a bunch of it analytically, I would be able to tell some whatever the story structure that you use generally. But I think you just because it's that same sort of story structure, you just get used to it and it becomes calming, and that's you sort of just get lost in it. And when you're a good storyteller, you can lose somebody in that like rhythm and cadence that you use over and over again.
And that right there is the goal in a lot of ways. As far as in being a storyteller or creating kind of these places that people can go in their mind. That's always been my goal when I do it. Like, cause I perform on stage as well. So if I'm telling stories on stage, or if I'm doing them through the podcast, or even through the writing, like writing, like reading. Okay, we got so many different distractions happening in our lives that reading sometimes is hard to do unless you have that practice going on in your life already, um or if the author can make me sink into this so far that I don't want to do anything else. This is the better distraction than anything else. So if I can sink into this story where I'm not even thinking about, okay, reading takes longer than listening to watching a movie or going to YouTube and zoning out on YouTube. So if that author can bring me into that, not saying it's a competition or anything like that, but if they can make that happen for me, then I'm lost in the words of it, and I'm not. And even in on stage, if I can if I can tell stories on stage and make you forget about sitting in that uncomfortable seat or he looks nervous up there. Audience people are going to have all these different things going in their head. The person next to him that they trying to get with, they got all these other things going in their head. But if I can give you, if I can, we can join one another on this journey, and you can feel it. I'm sure comedians and singers, and because sometimes I'm at a concert and it's just like the singer is filling the room, and I can feel like I'm in something. Now they might have done this 100 times, but if they can tap into that moment, I'm there with them. And that's the thing. And it's almost where I forget the outline of it or the format of it. Now sometimes I can be in the audience and watching a singer or a comedian or a different thing, and I can feel the structure. I can feel the structure of it. It can be funny and everything else, but I feel the structure. I feel, okay, this is beginning, middle is happening right now. Oh, this is dark. This could be something dark happening. If I can feel the structure, because we create this stuff, so we know. But if I can forget all that and I'm just totally in it and I'm grabbing my neck when the person is gonna get cut with the knife, and it just got me so far that I can feel my own body being in it, then I'm like, man, they did a great job. So I think as creators, or we want to create that. Like I think of that, like when I'm doing it, I'm like, man, if I can create that moment for a person, or create the moment for a person when it's real to them. Like I might be talking about my dad, but they might have a moment and cry about they mom or they auntie or something. It's just like, okay, I touched something there. But I think you got to tap in for it. I mean, you can have a structure of it as well, but then you have to tap into the emotion of things, because it's intellect and then there's emotion as well. So the intellect, it can go a lot of places just using intellectual skill and all that kind of thing, but then you have to tap into the emotion, and the emotion can be conveyed in words and feeling and pacing of telling stories, all those things. Yeah, play a part in it.
Well, there's something that I think younger creators or storytellers do where they're always trying to hit the high note of the beat constantly. Like everything is like a scream, basically. And they're like, it has to be, moment has to be big, and this moment has to be big, and this moment has to be big. And like you read their story and it's just everything turned up to 11. And one of the things I think that you have to learn as a storyteller is you have to sort of, even for books that I write, which are quite world ending, like universe skipping books, you like the only way that those make sense is to really revel in the small moments and the build up and the dip down and the movement of a piece, so that you're accentuating all of it, and the high moments feel so much higher if you took time in the low moments to let people recover from the last high and uh get ready for the new high. Like I I feel like it's sort of a wave that washes over people when you're doing long form narrative, less like of really short stories, but in like a novella or a novel or a semi long piece of story, is you're sort of building these peaks and valleys so that people like can fall into a rhythm. It's almost like when you're listening to music and they like lull you into this like hypnotic rhythm with the low beat and the high beat and this sort of trance like state that you're trying to get in. Or it's at least what I try to do. I know I did a good job. I have a proofreader that does all of my books basically, and I
Mm-hmm.
know when she messages me and is like, I just had to go back and reread this 40 pages because I got so into it that I forgot that I was proofreading it. So, and I'm like, I did it. I did something there then.
That is so true. That's a good one. I love that. I love that. That's a good example of that. If because I've had that happen. Like I had a friend at a storytelling show, and he said he was going to examine something. He was like, "Man, I forgot to examine that because I got into the story." And I was like, That's the whole idea. You hear, to listen to stories, not to examine our. But if he's writing a piece on it, he's thinking in that sense. So I like that. I love that. I love that as well. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, my favorite is when you get to the person who's like, "I'm going to figure this out," or "I know I've read all of your books. I know what you're going to what's going to happen," and you're like, "Did you know it was going to happen?" They're like, "I don't even. I was just not." Eventually, I just stopped trying because I understood the story structure, but it went so much. Then I got pulled into the story. I think that's for me, having the structure and having the story is like having a good bones is what allows me to be creative. So yeah, you're going to know that roughly every 2,000 words there's going to be an end of chapter, and I'm going to end on a high to like get you to read the next chapter, and
Hmm.
there's going to be all of these things that will happen, but it is in that structure that for me creativity lives. Like I was listening to a Frank Gehry masterclass, and he was talking about building a skyscraper, and he's like, it's about 15% creativity. I've got to follow all these codes and all these rules and all these blueprints and stuff, but in that there's about 10 to 15% which is me, and I
Hmm.
look at my work, I say, yeah, that's maybe 20% of it is like creatively me. The rest of it are these bones that I have to follow each time. But when I was a younger creator, I used to think that like that would kill my creativity. But now I know that like so a lot of people feel unmoored in time now, and like they don't feel like they have any structure or they don't know what's going on because things are hitting them so fast, and so they're spending all of their time kind of grasping for some foothold somewhere. And when they're grasping for footholds, they can't see the thing that's right in front of them. So I like to say that in my books, like, you have a foothold, you know what's the good guy's probably gonna most likely gonna win in the end.
Hmm.
The bad guy's gonna die. There's gonna be so many chapters that do these things and hit these points, and that's what you know you're going to get, which lets you like settle and ground and say, all right, I'm I'm here for this kind of story. And then that allows you to get lost in the story more because you know that like the storyteller is going to bring you on this journey and not leave you lost in the end.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I got you. What about characters on your end? Like, how, in the process, I know everybody has the things that they're good at, or they really love in their own stories that they read. Where do characters stand in that in those priorities of creating the stories for you?
One, characters, main characters, the number one thing. It's the structure and the everything else that I do is to uh uh there's a saying like conflict exposes character. And so the book for me is all about taking a character or a couple of main characters, because a lot of my books have multiple point of views, and throwing them into a world, and then watching them uh, encounter massive conflict, and watching how that shows their character for better or worse and builds their character as well. So
Hmm.
for me, the everything else is just the conceit to take to do a character study piece. How about you?
Yeah, for me, I I really love characters. Like, I like reading books and I want to be friends with that character. I want to know that character. Or I'm scared of that character. Or I'm even though this character is evil, I can understand why they're evil, and I feel for him. And don't hurt him, even though he didn't kill 20 people. Don't hurt him. He just So I like that whole aspect of character that that we can see ourselves in those characters, or we can see what we want to be or don't want to become. We can feel all that within the characters that we read and experience through my work, through others' work. So when I think of characters a lot, I'll think of okay, if I can group a group of people in this, that the listener or reader wants to be around, not a whole lot has to happen for me. You get what I'm saying? Everybody got their style. Not because I think they want to be around these characters, or I want to be around these characters so much that that I don't need to push a bunch of stuff happening. It's just like almost like friends. For me, it's like sitting on the porch with friends, and we just observing the neighborhood and cracking jokes, and that's fun. And that's what I be thinking sometimes with the stories that I'll write. They may not have much that'll happen, but the characters are fun to be around. There's a few good conversations happening, and then it's time to go home. Depending on if something happened or not happened. I like that. I like that feel. Or you'll feel the ominous of something underlying that may happen, and it may or may not. You got to read through to the end to feel it. To see if it happens. So I know. Sometimes those books aren't for everybody because people want a definite ends. Some people, some readers do, some listeners do, but that's what I say. It's all different kinds. And I love the point you had made when you get it, you get it. It's just like you, a person who reads your work. They fall into the cadence, they fall into the style, they fall into the characters that's there, and some may not like it, and that's not necessarily their cup of tea. But then some get it and they're like, "Oh, I love that." It's just like dry comedians. I like a dry comedian. Another person might like a more physical comedian or something like that. So it's just these different preferences that people have. But I know if you can fall into like if you fall in, like you like that kind of slow moving, regular life, normalcy, pedestrian things that's happening, I can take you on a little journey with my stories. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes you just are in the mood for that too. I find a lot of people put people in a box like, okay, they like fantasy, so they can't like thriller, or they can't like
Yeah,
slice
that's
of life
good.
stuff, and or they can't like my show and your show. They're two very different shows, but like they at the core, a human being is an amalgam of many different things, and
Very true.
I sometimes am not in the mood for your show. Heck, sometimes I'm not in the mood for my show, and it's my show. Uh,
Exactly.
it just so happens that it's possible that you'll catch someone on a day that they are like, "Ugh, what's this show?" And then they'll come back a week and they're like, or a month or a year later, and be like, "Whoa, what happened?" I want to talk to you about something that's near and dear to my heart, which I know you do these sort of brutal honesty workshops, right, for storytelling. And
Hmm.
I think a big part of your work, at least for me, is the vulnerability to like expose these parts of yourself that is so that feels raw a lot of times, or feels like you're invading like right into your brain. And you're like, wow, this is like, it feels like this is just literally I'm sitting inside Shannon's brain, and like an event is just playing as it played out. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how a person could bring more vulnerability to their work, or brutal honesty to their work.
Okay, so like I think it's layers. So to just say to a person, like, just immediately dive into this heavy honesty of 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 their life, and I don't think that that's honest there, just in general, because what happens is a person either a breakdown, or they'll feel they feel like they did themselves a disservice. I was watching this one thing once. Oh no, it was a Tony Robbins thing, where I'm not your guru, and he had this lady call her boyfriend and tell him that she wasn't in love with him, and you know, and I was watching that, and I'm just like, man, It was a time I mean, if she did it and made that decision, but sometimes when you're in a group like that and you make these decisions, that's not really you. You just kind of based on social pressure and everything else, you do it, you know. And I was looking at her over the course of the film and just how she looked, like she was just like, why did I do that? You know, you're being true to yourself. I've been wondering, like, when they get home 2 weeks later, are they are they still in that true to yourself mode? Because I think people have to do those things on their own time, or else they become cultish, they become religious, or they become it's not true to what they wanted to do. They're just doing it based on social pressure. So for me, I'm always one to layer it. So if I'm helping somebody else to get there, go there slowly. You know, just you can do it by asking yourself questions. You know, what did I really feel here? And what are my honest thoughts? And knowing that anything that you're creating from the draft standpoint doesn't necessarily have to go public. So if I'm writing myself, I'll write very, very honest. And that honesty might not be something that I want you to necessarily know. I want to have a foursome with, you know, your honesty may be my biggest dream in life is to you it could be some crazy shit that a person could say to that. But if I know I'm writing this, it is not going to get out to anyone else unless I want it to, that's fine. So you practice in that, and then maybe you let off a top layer of something, you know, and then you get more comfortable with it after a while. You can tell the world, I want to have a foursome. You know, and you feel comfortable with it, but you don't have to start there and then regret it and feel this regret and feel like this somebody's lured you into doing something that you don't want to do. So for me, it's the layered effect. And I think you can possibly even feel that in homemade stories, because I remember I did the first story, and then I did a second story, and I did one about um it was a couple going through a weird sexual experience. And I remember I let my mom read it or listen to it. And my mom never really heard me cuss, talk about any of that. And that was like a layer for me. Like, my mom heard me cuss, you know, and now I can go deeper. Now, that don't mean I have to be like some foul mouth, because that's not me naturally. So being comfortable cussing, not being totally foul mouth on everything, but then just becoming more me as I continue doing, you know, and being honest to those major desires that I might have, you know, those real deep desires that I might not want to share right away, but I can get to them as I continue in this work. I can get more comfortable in these really deep desires, because I think a lot of people have them. We don't want to share them. Like, comedians help us get to them. Or that's why we laugh so hard when they say something that I would never say that. But yeah, you think it all the time. That's why you're laughing so hard, you know. So I like that that aspect of the brutal honesty. But I don't believe you just go from 0 to 100, and I don't believe in forcing people to that either. You know, force them. I mean, encourage them in stages of that. You know.
I love that because I think that we have a a tendency to look at somebody where they are now and compare them to where you are now. And it's important to know that, like, this is a state that this was a process that took years to get to this place. And it meant peeling layers, and it meant like probably going too dark at some point and having to pull it back because you're like, oh yeah, I shouldn't have gone there. And then like learning like where the balance is over time, right?
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Good point.
So we're nearing the end of our hour together. I can't believe it's already just about time. And I want to give you a chance to talk about your shows or whatever you want to talk about. So, what are you working on now that you'd like the listeners to check out?
Well, Homemade Stories has been an ongoing podcast for over 10 years now. It started in 2010, and it's my play box of storytelling where it's personal narrative storytelling. If you think of The Moth, I've worked with them and Snap Judgment a lot, so I've worked with those organizations a lot. If you like those kind of stories, and then I'll also add in my fiction. I'll add in essays that I wrote. So, but it's more of a uh, you don't know what you're gonna get when you listen to it, but it's a feeling, an emotional trip. So I hope people will fall into that. And I love music. I play good music on there. That's probably copywritten that I shouldn't be playing, but but I play good music on it. And then I also work in storytelling with other projects. So I've worked with, like I said, the Moth, Snap Judgment, Spotify, different other companies on storytelling work. And one of the other storytelling shows I have is called In Good Co Detroit. I'm a native Detroiter, lived in Detroit most of my life, Detroit and Chicago, so Midwest all the way through. And this is the stories of entrepreneurs in Detroit. I'm interviewing, looking for those honest, vulnerable moments of them starting their business, and all of them aren't super successful and doing things all over the world. Some of them are mom and pop shops, just that you'll see as you're walking through a neighborhood. But I want to talk to them about their lives and what's their drive and their thing, because entrepreneurship, as I'm falling to it more and more, it is like it's a creative aspect as well. Like I've hang with poetry community and storytelling community and comedian community, and entrepreneurship is its own creative community as well. So I'm kind of telling those stories through ingoodcodetroit.com, and get at a listen.
I really love that what you said about entrepreneurship being its own creative journey, because I don't know if I would have agreed with you like 10 years ago, but I certainly on the other side of having run multiple companies, and
Hmm.
especially in the time we live now, like there's very little that's more creative than like, how do I still have my company in a year when everything is closed? Uh, that is some like very creative stuff right there. So I really love In Good Co. I love the homemade stories as well. But as an entrepreneur, I really appreciated how you brought sort of a voice to those stories. If people wanted to get like the most Shannon thing, and you were like, you can listen to one thing, what would you tell them to go listen to?
I would say listen to what's it called? Listen to um Homemade Stories, Johnny Walker Smith episode called Johnny Walker Smith, and that's probably my most. And that's a fictional story, but that's a story that came to me in all just in one sitting. I just was sitting down and I wrote the whole story, and then I recorded it, and I play all the voices in this story. And if I've done my job, my voice kind of like fades in the background, and it just becomes a narrative that you're listening to. So Johnny Walker Smith, I'm always happy to share that one on Homemade Stories. Just look
Awesome,
for
man.
it. Hmm.
So where can we find you? And then I'll ask you our last question, and then we'll say goodbye.
Well, you can find me at shannoncason.com. Cason is Cason, and you can find me on social media at Shanon Cason on most social media forums, and I'll be happy to connect with anyone.
Awesome, man. So here is the last question: is people have been driving or they maybe been tuning out, but this is when they come back just for a couple of minutes, and you deliver the best piece of advice that you can give them, whether it's for starting their career, it can be what you would tell yourself at the start of your career, but just the little nuggets you want them to leave this podcast with.
Uh, Everything has a place, so you put everything back in its place. If you have pens, you have your little pen thing that you keep your pens, and use one type of pen. Like you like a pen, I like the zebra pen. I use zebra ballpoints all the time, and I use one notebook. I got Cavalier or whatever the notebook's called, and I go get CVS and I go get them every time. So, and then everything has its place. And anybody who comes in my office and takes my scissors out without putting them back, they go hear from me. So put everything in its place,
Awesome,
and
man.
make sure people respect that. Yep.
Awesome, man. I love it. Well, thank you so much for stopping by, Shanon.
Hey, thank you too. I appreciate it, Russell.
So that was Shanon Cason. And I hope you enjoyed that one. If you did, make sure to go find Shanon, listen to his podcast. I have been listening to In Good Company and Homemade Stories, and I think both are wonderful. Shannon's got a really great rhythm and flow. I hope you heard it on the show. That is quite unique in the world of podcasting, and I appreciate that very thoughtful, slow, introspective rhythm that he has. So I highly recommend his shows. And if you like this show, you can head on over to thecompletecreative.com and check out all of our archives, epic blog posts, free courses, and more. Remember, you can take our free creative business course. It's 10 days, 10 emails, 10 things you should know before starting your creative business over at thecompletecreative.com/FBC. And please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to this show. It's the best way for us to be found by new people and to know that what we're doing is connecting with you. That's it for me. Have a great day.